Unit 9, Lesson 4. Now, I would answer these based on my understanding of using the shortcut method. And by shortcut method, I mean looking at my unit circle and being able to derive what is the sine, cosine, and tangent of each of these points. But Mr. McFarland specifically wants us not to do that. So he does not want us to look at the unit circle we've created and then come up with these answers. And so when it comes to your quiz next week and your assessment next week, you will also not be able to use that. So how do we answer these based on our understanding of 30, 60, 90 triangles and 45, 45? So this is a 30 degree, this is a 60 degree and 90, this is 45 and 45. Okay. So evaluate the 6 trig functions using the common right triangle. So I'm going to draw this picture here. This is what it looks like. So this is my 60, my interior. This is 30. Now across from 60 is radical 3. Across from the 90 degrees is a 2. And across from 30 is a 1. Okay, so remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And he uses this acronym. Oscar had a heap of apples. So Oscar, A, O, and H stand for opposite over hypotenuse for sine. A over H stands for adjacent over hypotenuse for cosine. And for tangent, it's O over A, opposite over adjacent. All right, so here we go. So for sine, I want to go what's opposite of this interior angle. Opposite is radical 3 over 2. Radical 3 over 2. Now my cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent of this angle means what helps create this angle. Only two sides help create this angle, and adjacent can never be the hypotenuse or the longest side. So adjacent is 1 over hypotenuse is 2. Now tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent would be radical 3 over 1, which is radical 3. Now when we do cosecant, secant, and cotangent, we simply need to take the reciprocals and write them in proper form. So if I take the reciprocal of radical 3 over 2, it would be 2 over radical 3, but this isn't in proper form. I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same value as the denominator. I end up with 2 radical 3 over radical 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, and that's going to be 2 radical 3 over 3. Now, we'll come back to these as we go throughout this lesson. Let's go now to the reciprocal of 1 over 2. The reciprocal of 1 over 2 is 2 over 1. And the reciprocal of radical 3 over 1 would be 1 over radical 3. Again, we multiply the numerator and the denominator, in this case by radical 3. I have 1 radical 3 over radical 9, and the square root of radical 9, or the square root of 9, excuse me, would be 3. So I have radical 3 over 3. Now this angle lands in quadrant 1. When we use the acronym All-Star Trig class, it tells us what is positive. So remember, it's cosine followed by sine as an ordered pair. So both cosine and sine are positive. All of them are positive. Cosine, sine, and the tangent in quadrant 1. In quadrant 2, only sines are positive. In quadrant 3, only tangents are positive. In quadrant 4, only cosines. So cosines, tangents, sines, and all are positive in quadrant 1. So since this lands in quadrant 1, the 3 major trig functions are positive, and so are their reciprocals. Let's go on right now to number 2. Number 2, I'm going to make a 30-degree interior angle. So this is 30, 60, and 90. Across from 30 is 1, across from 90 degrees is 2, and across from 60 is radical 3. Okay, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 1 over 2, and the reciprocal is 2 over 1. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent would be radical 3 over 2, radical 3 over 2, and now the reciprocal is 2 over radical 3. 2 over radical 3, but written in proper form would be 2 radical 3 over 3. The tangent is opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent would be 1 over radical 3. So 1 over radical 3. This is what the tangent is, but it's not in proper form. So let's put it in proper form. Radical 3, radical 3. So radical 3 over radical 9, radical 3 over 3. Okay, this is what the tangent is, radical 3 over 3. Now, remember, this is equivalent. 1 over radical 3 is equivalent in proper form to radical 3 over 3. These are equivalent. If I take the reciprocal of 1 over radical 3, I get radical 3 over 1. And I don't have to put it in proper form because we already have a square root in the numerator. Remember, it's breaking a math rule to give a final answer with a square root written in the denominator. Let's move on to 45. So 45 is up here. This is 45, 45, and 90. Across from 45 will be 1s, and across from 90 degrees will be the square root of 2. We're always focused on this interior angle. So sine is opposite over adjacent. Sorry, opposite over hypotenuse. And I'm going to grab another one here. So 1 over radical 2. Now 1 over radical 2, that's not wrong, but it's not in proper form. So I'm going to multiply by square root of 2 to get square root of 2 or square root of 4. What does this mean? This means that this is equivalent to 1 over square root of 2. So although 1 over square root of 2 is correct, it's not in proper form, so square root of 2 over 2. Now what's the reciprocal of that? Well, the reciprocal of 1 over the square root of 2 is the square root of 2 over 1. Let's go to cosine. We're going to see cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So 1 over the square root of 2 again. Written in proper form is square root of 2 over 2. If I take the reciprocal of this original ratio, because your trigonometry, all it is identifying two sides. You're just making a ratio that compares two sides, and how you're going to achieve the two sides is following the rules that are attached to each of the trig functions. So tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. Opposite is 1, adjacent is 1, 1 over 1 is 1, and the reciprocal is still 1. This is in quadrant 1, and everything is positive. But again, where do I find 210? Well, remember, 21 is divisible by 3, so I'm going to count by 3s. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. Here is where 210 is. It's in quadrant 3. So at this position, I have a 30 degrees here, 60 here, and at this place I have my 90 degrees. Now if we look up above to the 30, 60, 90 triangle and to the 45, 45, 90 triangle, we can see that across from 30 degrees will be 1, across from 90 degrees will be 2, and across from 60 will be the square root of 3. What is the sine? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so 1/2 and the reciprocal. The cosine is adjacent, radical 3 over the hypotenuse. Now when I take the reciprocal of radical 3 over 2, it's 2 over radical 3. Well, here's 2 over radical 3, so I've already flipped it, but now you put it in proper form to get 2 radical 3 over 3. Let's find the tangent. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So I have 1 over radical 3. Here's 1 over radical 3. Let me put this down so you can see. Here's 1 over radical 3. When I take the reciprocal, I end up with radical 3 over 3. So this is, hold on here. This is radical 3. My fault. This is radical 3 over 3. So 1 over radical 3 is equivalent to radical 3 over 3. Now 1 over radical 3, when I take the reciprocal, I get radical 3 over 1. Radical 3 over 1. Now this is in quadrant number 4. In quadrant 4, following the acronym All-Star Trig Class, this is in quadrant 3. Only the tangent is positive. So this would be positive, and so with the reciprocal, everything else gets one negative sign. A common question is, where do I put the negative? As long as there's one, whether it's in the middle, up top, or on the bottom, it all is the same. Let's find 315. This is 315. 315 is a 45-degree interior angle. So here's 45 and here's 45. I go up top. Across from the 45s will be 1s. So this will be a 1, this is 1, and this is the square root of 2. Okay, so from this interior angle, I can do the sine. It's 1 over radical 2. Now 1 over radical 2, this isn't wrong. This is mathematically correct, but it's not written in proper form. In proper form, it will be the square root of 2 over 2. And when I take the reciprocal, which is cosecant, so this is my original ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. When I take the reciprocal of that, I get radical 2 over 1. Okay, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so 1 over radical 2 again, written in proper form is radical 2 over 2, and when I write it as reciprocal, it's radical 2 over 1. Now let's do the tangent. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So 1 over 1 is 1, and the reciprocal of 1 is simply 1. This is in quadrant 4. Now in quadrant 4, only the cosines are positive. So cosine's positive, and so is the reciprocal. Everything else gets 1 negative. Let's go to 120. So this is divisible by 3, 3, 6, 9, 12. Here's 120. It lands in quadrant number 2. This interior angle here is going to be a 60 degrees down below, 30 degrees up top. It's hard to see, so I'm going to draw that again. So this is 60 and 30. Now across from 60 degrees will be a radical 3, across from 30 degrees is a 1, and across from 90 is going to be a 2. Now this interior angle is the 60. This is the angle that we're focusing on. So when we say sine, it's opposite over hypotenuse. So radical 3 over 2. Now what is reciprocal? The reciprocal is 2 over radical 3, but that's not in proper form, so I have to write it in proper form. 2 radical 3 over 3. 2 radical 3 over 3. The cosine here, so a cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so it's 1 over 2, and reciprocal is 2 over 1. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, so radical 3 over 1. And now when I take the reciprocal of radical 3 over 1, I have 1 over radical 3. Here's 1 over radical 3, and when I write it in proper form, it's radical 3 over 3. Now, most students forget this part. They forget as they're rushing through this to go, this lands in quadrant 2, and in quadrant 2, only the sine and its reciprocal are positive. So sine's positive and the reciprocal. Everything else gets 1 negative. Let's look at 7, 8, and 9. All right, 7 and 9 are now going to involve values that are either greater than 360 or they're reversing it. So a couple ways you can think about this is if we take 360, which is 1 revolution, and we add a negative 225, that tells you where this is going to land. So I want to find 135. So 135 is going to be right here. So a negative 225 would be right at this position, right at this position. Now, a lot of students are able to find that, but they ask themselves, how do I make a triangle? Like, do I make it back to the y-axis or to the x-axis? It's always to the x-axis, and the interior angle is the one that's closest once you make that triangle. It's the angle that's closest to the origin. So here is my triangle. This is a 45-degree angle, so this is 45, and this is 45 and 90. Now across from the 45s, when we look up above, we see we have a ratio of 1, and across from 90 degrees is a square root of 2. Okay, sine is going to be opposite of this angle. I'm going to color this in. So opposite is going to be 1 over the square root of 2. That's not wrong. 1 over the square root of 2 is not wrong, but I need to write it in proper form, which is the square root of 2 over 2. The same thing here. When I do cosine, it's going to be adjacent over the hypotenuse, which is again 1 over the square root of 2, written in proper form, square root of 2 over 2. Now when I take the reciprocals of these for cosecant and secant, I would flip it. So it was 1 over the square root of 2. And that wasn't wrong, it just wasn't proper form. So when I take the reciprocal of this, I get the square root of 2 over 1, the square root of 2 over 1. Okay, let's go on to tangent. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, so 1 over 1 is 1, and the reciprocal is 1. Now this lands in quadrant number 2, all star. S stands for sine. Only sine and the reciprocal is positive. So positive and positive. Everything else gets 1 negative sign. Let's take a look at 300. So I'm going to take 360 and I'm going to add a negative 300. So I want to graph 60. So this angle right here is 60, this interior angle. Now across from 60 degrees, let me move this here so you can see, across from 60 is radical 3, across from 30 is 1, and across from 90 is 2. This is the angle. Our triangle always has one leg that is on the x-axis. So I'm going to go sine opposite is radical 3 over 2. Now when I take the reciprocal, which is cosecant, I'm going to find this. Radical 3 over 2, when I flip it, is 2 over radical 3. But now I need to make it proper, and we end with 2 radical 3 over 3. Let's go with cosine. Cosine is 1 over 2 because it's adjacent over hypotenuse. When I take it and flip it or find the reciprocal, it's 2 over 1. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, so radical 3 over 1. Now when I flip radical 3 over 1, I end up with 1 over radical 3. Now 1 over radical 3, if we write it in proper form, it's radical 3 over 3. All of these are correct, but I need to account for the fact that this lands in quadrant 1, all-star trait class, so everything is positive. Let's look now at, so negative 150. Again, I'm going to take 360, I'm going to add a negative 150. I need to graph 210. 21 is divisible. 21 is divisible by 3, so 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and 21. This is a 30-degree angle. This is 60, and this is my right angle. So across from 60 is going to be a radical 3. Across from 30 will be 1, and across from 90 will be 2. So what is the sine? This is the angle that I'm coloring. It's that interior angle that we're always going to evaluate. So I'm going to create a ratio based on what would be the procedures to find sine. Opposite over hypotenuse. So 1 over 2, and the reciprocal 2 over 1 for cosecant. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, radical 3 over 2, and although 2 radical over radical 3 is correct, when we write it in proper form, 2 over radical 3 is now 2 radical 3 over 3. Tangent will be opposite over adjacent. So 1 over radical 3, that's mathematically right, but it's not in proper form. So 1 over radical 3 can be rewritten as radical 3 over 3. Now if I had 1 over radical 3, which was right here, and I take the reciprocal, it would be radical 3 over 1. This lands in quadrant number 3, all-star trig, so only tangents are positive in the reciprocal. Positive and positive, everything else gets a negative sign. Let's look at the next three. Right, so when we look at 390, because I know it's greater than 360, I'm going to take 390 and subtract 360. So I need to find where is 30 degrees. 30 degrees is right here, and that's that interior angle. So opposite of 60 degrees is going to be a radical 3, opposite of 30 is a 1, and opposite of 90 is 2. This is the angle that I am going to evaluate for each of the 6 trig functions. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and the reciprocal is 2 over 1. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and now when I take radical 3 over 2 and I take the reciprocal, I get 2 over radical 3, rewritten as 2 radical 3 over 3. 2 radical 3 over 3. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so 1 over radical 3 should go here, but I need to write it in proper form. So 1 over radical 3 is correct. In proper form, it's radical 3 over 3. Again, 1 over radical 3 was here, so when I take the reciprocal of 1 over radical 3, I get radical 3 over 1, or simply radical 3. This lands in quadrant number 1, and so everything is positive. Let's look now at 1035. So the first thing I do is, I know that's much greater than 360. I take 135 and I divide it by 360. So I know it goes in at least 2 times, and then there is a remainder. So I'm going to first take out those 2 revolutions. So I'm going to take out 360 and 360. What am I left with is 315. So I need a graph where 315 is. 315 is this 45 degree. So right here, this interior is 45, 45, and 90. Across from the 45 degree angles would be 1, and across from 90 would be the square root of 2. Okay, so this is the interior angle that I am evaluating. So when I do the sine, it's opposite over the hypotenuse, so 1 over radical 2, rewritten as square root of 2 over 2. Now if I take the reciprocal of 1 over the square root of 2 before I put it in proper form, I get simply the square root of 2 over 1, or the square root of 2. Cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, so again 1 over the square root of 2, but it's not proper. Square root of 2 over 2, and again taking the reciprocal would be square root of 2 over 1, or simply the square root of 2. Tangent is 1 over 1, which is 1, and the reciprocal is still 1. In quadrant number 4, all-star trig class. Class starts with a C, so only cosines are positive and the reciprocal. Everything else gets a negative. So everything else except for the cosine and its reciprocal are going to be negative. All right, let's go on to negative 480. So it's greater than a negative 360. So I'm going to take 360 and let's see here. So I know that I'm going to go 360 around. So 360 would be here. So let's just take, first of all, what is 360? And I want to subtract 480. So there's a difference of 120. Okay, so 360 plus, if you look here, negative 360 plus a negative 120. I didn't explain that very well in my thought process. Negative 360 and a negative 120 is a negative 480. So this is the same as negative 360 plus a negative 120. Now, what am I doing that? This means one revolution backwards, right? Plus a negative 120. So I need to find another negative 120. Now, in my mind, I know negative 120 is, I'm going to do groups of 3 going backwards. So this is one way to think of it. So 3, 6, 9, right here's where I'm going to land. I know this is where I'm going to land. That's how my thought process works. If not, another way to do it is to take 360 and add a negative 120. And I want to find where 240 lands. So divisible by 3, let's count by 3s to get to 24. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. And we can see I still land at this position. So I'm coming straight out here and back up. This is 60, this is 30, and this is 90. Across from 60 is radical 3, across from 30 is 1, and across from 90 degrees is going to be a 2. This is the angle that I'm going to evaluate. Okay, so what is sine? It's going to be opposite over hypotenuse. And now when I take the square root of 3 over 2, and I take the reciprocal, it's 2 over radical 3, written in proper form, is 2 radical 3 over 3. Cosine is going to be adjacent over the hypotenuse, 1 over 2 and 2 over 1. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, so radical 3 over 1. Now when I flip this to take the reciprocal, yes, 1 over radical 3 is correct, but it's not in proper form. So when I take 1 over radical 3 and I rewrite it, I get radical 3 over 3. This is in quadrant 3, all-star trig. Only tangents are positive. Positive and positive. Everything else gets one negative. Let's look at the next page.